The sky was breaking open. Above the ancient island of Themyscira, lightning danced like wild serpents through blood-red clouds. Storms clashed with fire as ships made of cold steel and alien flame tore through the heavens. The Amazons fought bravely, but their swords were no match for the machines. Their war cries echoed like thunder, fading into silence one by one. In the heart of the crumbling temple, Wonder Woman knelt, her armor scorched, her arms wrapped around a newborn wrapped in golden cloth. Her breath came in broken gasps. She was dying. But the child, her daughter, was alive. Eyes like two fragments of starlight stared back at her, wide and calm, unaware of the world ending around them. A final tremor shook the ground. Columns cracked. Statues fell. The sky screamed. With trembling hands, Diana placed the child inside a small pod shaped like a star. Ancient Amazonian runes lit up across its surface, pulsing with a soft light. She kissed the baby's forehead, her voice barely a whisper. "You are hope. You are light. Forgive me." Then, with one last surge of strength, she pushed the pod into the Heartfire, a magical core once used to power the city. The chamber exploded in golden flame, swallowing Diana and launching the pod upward, faster than any scream. Themyscira vanished in fire and sea. The pod streaked across the sky, cutting through warships and storms like a comet. It burned across the stars, fell through dimensions, and crashed onto a ruined world far from Earth, Gamma 13, a place forgotten by time and mercy. The ground split when it landed. Smoke billowed high into the red-hazed sky. From the shadows of the wasteland, something enormous stirred. A figure emerged from the fog, towering, green, scared, muscles like boulders, eyes filled with silence and sorrow. The Hulk, not the monster of old battles. This was a creature worn down by war, shaped by grief, a wanderer with nothing left to protect. And then he heard it, a cry. Small, pure, fragile, his brow furrowed. The sound tugged at something buried deep inside. He stepped toward the smoking crater, each step cracking the dry earth. Reaching into the wreckage, he pulled away debris until he found the pod, its glow flickering. Inside, the baby blinked at him. Not afraid, just curious. Hulk stared. His massive hand trembled. He had crushed mountains. He had broken gods. But this child, this tiny flame, held his gaze like nothing ever had. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his thumb. And for the first time in years, the rage didn't rise. Instead, something else did. Something quiet. Something almost forgotten. He didn't know where she came from. He didn't care. She was alone. So was he. He scooped her into his arms with surprising gentleness. She made a soft sound, nestled against his chest, and closed her eyes. The world kept burning. But in the middle of the wasteland, a monster held a miracle. And he decided, without words, that he would protect her with everything he had left. Even if it cost him everything. Years had passed. The child, Lyra, as Hulk had named her, had grown stronger, faster. Her long, dark hair shimmered like silk, and her eyes, they still held the stars in them, like tiny fragments of the cosmos, too vast to contain in a single gaze. She was not a normal girl. Even as a child, she had a presence that felt ancient, like the earth itself had birthed her to protect it. And the world around them, Gamma 13, was a world that needed protection. In the deep wilderness of this forgotten planet, Hulk had become something else too. Not the monster he once was, not the mindless beast, but a father, by some strange twist of fate. His rage, the one thing that had once defined him, was now tempered, softened by the small hands that reached for him. She had become his tether, his anchor in a life that was too often filled with chaos. Lyra had learned quickly, too quickly. She ran like the wind, her laughter echoing through the barren landscapes. She swung from trees, mimicking the moves Hulk had shown her. the martial arts taught by his own rough hands. She had his strength, but her power came from something deeper, from somewhere ancient, like a force woven into the fabric of her soul. She could command the wind. The ground trembled when she was upset, and when she smiled, even the most bitter of storms seemed to fall silent. But they were alone, and loneliness always left a mark. There were no other voices here, no other family to remind her of her true lineage. The planet had been forgotten by the gods. It had been lost in time, a broken corner of the universe where hope and civilization were nothing but whispered myths. And so, Lyra had no one but Hulk, no one but him to tell her who she was. One evening, as the twin moons of Gamma 13 hung in the sky like pale watchers, Lyra sat beside the fire, her face illuminated by the flickering light. Hulk sat on the other side, staring into the flames, his thoughts a million miles away. She didn't have to speak for him to feel her eyes on him, the way she studied him, as if she were searching for something in the lines of his worn face. She had never asked about her past, never pressed him for answers, but Hulk knew. She needed to know. "Do you ever wonder who I am, Father?" Her voice broke the silence. Hulk looked up. Her question hung in the air like a storm cloud, one that had waited far too long to burst. She was young, but he could see the weight of the universe beginning to gather in her eyes. The child's heart was a ticking clock, waiting for the moment when the truth would unravel everything. He sighed, his breath heavy. "You're more than I can understand. You're like the sky, like the earth. No one can really know all that you are, Lyra." Her eyes shimmered, sadness brushing against her youthful face. "But I'm not like you, am I? I'm not like the others." His heart clenched. The others. The people she had never known. The royal bloodline that ran through her veins, the power of the Amazons that pulsed within her, the destiny that awaited her, a crown too heavy for even the gods. "No," Hulk said softly, his voice rough. "You're something else entirely. But you don't need to be like anyone else. You're you." She leaned against him, her small hand resting on his, and for a moment, the world felt still. His green skin was rough, but her touch was gentle. It was the only thing that had ever kept him human. But the storm was coming. The quiet before the storm. He could feel it. Far off in the galaxy, in a place where shadows walked, enemies were stirring. His daughter was destined for something greater, something dangerous. He could feel it in the air, the way the ground shifted beneath their feet. And it would soon be too late to keep her safe from the world that had already begun hunting her. The stars were dying. Lyra felt it in the air that night, a crackling tension that rippled through the winds. The world seemed to tremble beneath her feet, as though it too could feel the coming chaos. She stood on a ridge, the jagged cliffs of Gamma 13 stretching beneath her like broken bones. Below, the burning remnants of a battle still flickered, faint plumes of smoke rising toward the purple sky. She had heard the explosions hours before. The fight had started small, a skirmish between the scattered rebel forces that fought against the invaders of their world. But now it had turned into something else. A war was coming, and she would be ready. Hulk had warned her to stay close. He had always warned her, but there was no staying behind now. Her heart was calling her toward the battlefield, toward the whispers of a world that still had fight left in it. As she moved down the cliffs, her movements were a blur, too fast for the eye to follow, her feet barely touching the earth as she ran. The ground shifted beneath her, the sound of rocks skittering away a distant memory as she cut through the smoky air. Her senses were alive. The blood in her veins hummed with energy she didn't fully understand, but it was there, fierce and undeniable. She reached the rebel camp just as dawn's first light broke over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the wreckage. Bodies lay scattered, some still breathing, others cold. A handful of survivors huddled around the flickering remains of a fire, their eyes empty, their hearts heavy with defeat. But then she saw him. He stood apart from them, a shadow among shadows, his gaze sharp and calculating. His body was scared, cybernetic enhancements along his arm, a jagged patchwork of metal and flesh. His eyes, however, were something else. They were sharp, cold, but with an edge of something else, something buried, something desperate. Kale. She had heard the whispers of his name. The rebel leader who had defied every order, every tradition. The one who had led his people through impossible odds. He had a reputation, one that scared as much as it inspired. But in that moment, as their eyes met across the field, neither of them moved. It was as though the world had stopped, frozen in time. She felt an odd flicker in her chest, a heat that had nothing to do with the fire around them. It was a recognition, a spark, something ancient that stirred in the space between them. Cal's gaze softened just slightly, as if he had sensed it too. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. The sound of her boots on the cracked earth was the only noise in the still morning air. The others turned to watch, wary and uncertain. "You're the one they call Lyra, aren't you?" Kel's voice was low, rough with the dust of battles past. Her chin tilted slightly. "I am." "Then you're the one who's been tearing through our enemies like they're nothing." His lips quirked in a half-smile, but there was no humor in it, just a hard edge. Quite a reputation for someone so young. "And you're the one who leads these people into destruction," she shot back, her voice sharper than she meant. Kale stepped closer, his eyes studying her with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Destruction is the only way to win a war." Her gaze didn't waver. "And what's the price of victory?" "Your soul." His eyes flickered for a moment, something shifting behind them. He wasn't expecting her to challenge him. Not like this. She had the spirit of a warrior in her. And in that moment, she realized how much it mirrored the woman she had been born from. He seemed to study her, assessing the power that hummed beneath the surface of her words. She wasn't just a girl. She wasn't just Wonder Woman's daughter. No, there was something greater in her, something that made him wonder what she would become. And that was the moment they both knew their fates were tangled. There was no running now. "Maybe I'm tired of the war," Kale said quietly, the firelight dancing across his scared face. "Maybe I'm looking for something else." Her heart skipped. She didn't understand it yet. The pull, the magnetic force between them. But she could feel it. Something was beginning. Something dangerous. Lyra didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them was enough. And somewhere in the distance, something far darker was coming. Something that would tear apart everything they had ever known. But for now, there was only this moment. This first touch of fire. The day Lyra found out who she was, the sky itself seemed to bend. It happened on the edge of Gamma 13, where the wind cut through the jagged peaks like a blade. She stood at the cliff's edge, staring down at the sprawling wasteland below. Her home, a land of broken earth and ancient secrets. The whispers had grown louder in the last few weeks. Strange ships had appeared in the sky, like distant stars fallen from the heavens, their engines humming with a foreboding energy. Rebels had scattered. Whole cities had disappeared into smoke. But today was different. Lyra was no longer just the daughter of a monster. She was the last heir of a forgotten dynasty. Kale had found her that morning in the heart of their camp, his face grave. There was a tremor in his voice, one he couldn't quite hide, and that was when she knew. "I need you to come with me," he said, his tone more urgent than usual. Lyra followed him, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. They walked together through the camp, past the wounded and the weary, toward the center, where a small, hidden alcove had been carved into the mountain. Inside was a shrine. It wasn't the kind of shrine built by the hands of men. No, this one was older, woven from the bones of the earth itself. The walls shimmered with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with the power of something long buried. A pedestal sat in the center, adorned with a silver tiara, jagged yet beautiful. Kale didn't speak as he approached it, but Lyra's heart began to race. She had seen the tiara before. It had been woven into her dreams, visions of a life that didn't quite fit into the one she had known. Cal's voice broke through her thoughts, low and steady. This belonged to her. Lyra's throat tightened. She knew, deep down, what he meant. Her mother, Wonder Woman, the one who had fought for justice, for truth, and who had died in the battle that had shattered their world. The tiara, her mother's crown, was the symbol of a kingdom that had crumbled, a line that had been severed in a single moment. And now it lay before her. The prophecy, Cal continued, says that the last of the royal blood will rise from the ashes of the old world and unite what remains. You're more than just a child of the gods, Lyra. You're the one who will bring them together, or tear them apart. The weight of his words sank into her like a stone thrown into still water. The power of her lineage, the destiny she had never asked for, settled on her shoulders like an invisible chain. I don't want this, she whispered, though she already knew the answer. Cal's gaze softened, his voice like a distant echo. You don't have to want it. It's who you are. She looked at the tiara, her mother's tiara. It was warm to the touch, as though it had been waiting for her hand all this time. But the moment her fingers brushed against the cool metal, something inside her snapped. A surge of power, ancient and raw, exploded through her veins like wildfire. She fell to her knees, gasping as visions filled her mind. Flashes of battlefields, of armies gathered under her banner, of a throne she didn't know how to sit on. I don't know how to be her, Lyra choked, her voice breaking. I don't know how to be them. Cal kneeled beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to be them. You just need to be you. You're the future of both worlds, Lyra. And sometimes, the future doesn't need to ask for permission. For a long moment, they were silent. The world around them was still, waiting. The tiara pulsed with power in Lyra's hands, and slowly the weight of her destiny began to settle into her bones. It wasn't just a crown. It was a call, a summons to something greater than herself, something she couldn't run from. Her fingers tightened around the tiara. I will not fail, she whispered, more to herself than to Cal. The winds outside howled as the prophecy began to turn its gears, setting in motion events that would shape the world. And Lyra, Wonder Woman's daughter, rose to meet her fate. The world had begun to fracture. Lyra stood at the edge of the ruins, the weight of the tiara pressing heavily against her brow. Its power coursed through her like a storm, and with every breath, she could feel the echoes of her mother's legacy. But the tiara wasn't just a symbol, it was a responsibility, a burden that no one could truly understand until they wore it. She had walked away from the shrine, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Cal had tried to warn her, but no words could prepare her for the enormity of what was unfolding. The world was changing, and it was changing because of her. Gamma 13 was no longer just a forgotten world. It was now the center of something much larger, something she had never anticipated. The invaders that had once seemed like distant shadows were closing in, their warships now hovering above the mountains, their forces gathering like a dark storm on the horizon. Cal had gathered the rebels, the last of the free people. Their eyes were filled with hope, but Lyra could see the doubt in their faces. They knew what she had become, the princess, the heir to the throne of a kingdom long destroyed, and they didn't know whether to worship her or fear her. She had come to them, not as a child, but as their leader. The crown on her head felt like a fire burning through her, but she had no choice but to wear it. Her feet carried her forward, her steps heavy as she approached the gathered people. The wind whipped around her, pulling at her hair and the flowing cloak she wore. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for something, anything, from her. Do you hear it? Cal's voice broke through her thoughts, his voice low and filled with an edge of concern. He stood beside her, his eyes watching the sky. The fleet's here. It's only a matter of time before they come for you. She nodded, feeling the storm building inside her. Every nerve in her body screamed to fight, to defend, to protect. But the question still lingered in her mind. How do you fight when you don't even know who you are anymore? Her gaze shifted to the horizon, where the massive fleet hovered above the mountains, casting a dark shadow over the land. There were too many of them, too many to defeat with just the ragtag rebels who had joined her cause. But there was something else, something deep within her, something that connected her to this world. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her, like a heartbeat, guiding her. She reached out, her hand brushing the ground. Her fingers trembled as the energy surged through her, wrapping around her in a wave of power that left her breathless. The earth shook. The sky itself seemed to bend. Cale looked at her, his eyes wide. "Lyra, you're..." Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She could feel the power building, too much for her to control. Her vision blurred as she lifted her hand toward the sky, the ground beneath her feet cracking as she called upon the forces of the earth itself. The ground split open, a deep rift carving its way through the landscape. The invaders' ships trembled in the air, as if caught in a gravitational pull they couldn't escape. Lyra's pulse quickened, her heart beating in sync with the rhythm of the earth. It was too much. She could feel it threatening to consume her, her own power threatening to rip her apart. She screamed, the sound of it cutting through the chaos. The energy surged forward, a shockwave that slammed into the ships above, knocking them off course. Some fell from the sky, crashing into the mountains, their explosions lighting up the darkening sky. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Lyra collapsed to her knees, her breath ragged. The power faded, leaving her drained, her body trembling with the aftershock of what she had just unleashed. Cale was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder, pulling her close. "You did it," he whispered, but his voice was filled with awe and fear. "You stopped them." Lyra looked up at the sky, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She had stopped them for now, but the war wasn't over, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could hold it all together. Her hand fell to her side, her fingers brushing the tiara once more. The crown wasn't just a gift from her mother. It was a reminder of everything that was at stake, and the weight of that reminder, of what she had become, was heavier than she had ever imagined. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cale didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just stood beside her, offering his silent support. The storm was far from over, and Lyra, the devoted princess, was only just beginning to understand the cost of the crown. The sky had turned a deep shade of violet, the fading light from the distant stars casting an eerie glow over the land. The earth, still shaking from the shockwaves Lyra had unleashed, now lay still. But the calm was only an illusion. The war was far from over. Lyra stood at the center of the rebel camp, the weight of her choices bearing down on her. She could still feel the aftershocks of the power she had summoned, the way it had ripped through her body, burning her from the inside out. She had never felt anything like it before. And the worst part, she had enjoyed it. A voice, cold and filled with doubt, pierced the silence. "You could have killed them." Lyra turned slowly to face Cale, his expression unreadable. The shadows of the campfire flickered across his face, casting a harsh light on the hardened lines of his jaw. His eyes, usually full of fire, were now dull, drained, as if something inside him had been snuffed out. "I didn't kill them," she said softly, her voice trembling, though she tried to hide it. "I stopped them." Cale's gaze hardened, and for a moment, it felt as though the air between them crackled with tension. "Do you even understand what you did?" His words were sharp, almost accusing. "The power you've been given, it's not just a tool. It's a weapon, and you used it like one, like you were them." Lyra recoiled at his words, the sting of them cutting deep. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't," Cale interrupted, his tone bitter. "But that doesn't change what happened. The world doesn't care about your intentions. The world only sees the destruction, the power." Her chest tightened. The words stung, but she knew he was right. She had felt it, the darkness that had swelled within her, threatening to consume her. And the fear in Cal's eyes, the same fear she had seen in the eyes of the rebels, of everyone she had ever met, was proof that she was no longer just a hero. She was something else now, something they feared. "I'm not them," she whispered, more to herself than to Cal. But the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. Cal didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked up at the sky, his expression haunted. "You're not like them yet, but you will be if you keep using that power." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle in her gut like a stone. She had thought she could control it, thought that with the tiara, with the power of her mother's legacy, she could protect her people. But Cal was right. She had used it without thought, without understanding the cost. "What if I can't control it?" she asked, her voice small. "What if it takes me over?" Cal stepped forward, his hand hovering close to her shoulder, but he didn't touch her. "Then you have to make a choice. You can keep running from the truth, or you can accept it. You have the power to save this world, or destroy it. But you need to choose who you are before it's too late." His words echoed in the quiet night, the weight of them sinking in. She wanted to argue, to deny it all, but deep down she knew. She felt the pull of the power within her, the ancient force of the Amazons, the raw strength of the earth itself. It was a force beyond her understanding, and it was only growing stronger. Lyra looked at the tiara once more, feeling the cold metal against her skin. She had always thought of it as a symbol of hope, a gift from her mother. But now she wasn't so sure. Was it a gift, or was it a curse? Was it the key to saving the world, or the key to its destruction? The answer wasn't clear, and that terrified her. "I don't want to become something I can't control," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be like them." Cal's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was a flicker of the man he once was, the leader, the protector, the man who had stood by her side when no one else would. "You won't be," he said gently, "but you have to learn to control it, before it controls you." A silence fell between them, thick with the weight of unspoken words. The winds picked up again, whipping through the camp, as if urging them both forward. Lyra stood still, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the invaders' ships still hovered like a dark cloud. The battle wasn't over, and the real fight was only just beginning. Lyra closed her eyes, bracing herself. She didn't know if she was ready, but one thing was certain: she would fight. She had no choice. The battlefield was silent, but Lyra could hear the thrum of her heartbeat in her ears. The rebellion had gathered at the base of the great mountain, where the enemy's war machines loomed, casting dark shadows across the earth. Their final assault was near. She could feel it in her bones. The air was thick with the tension of what was to come. Cal had warned her again, "Don't use the power unless you have no other choice." But Lyra wasn't sure she could hear his warning anymore. The darkness inside her, the power that surged with every heartbeat, was growing louder, more demanding. It had taken root, like a seed planted deep within her. The tiara on her brow had become an anchor and a burden. Every step she took felt heavier. Her breath caught in her chest as she approached the heart of the camp, where the council of rebels waited, their faces grim. They were ready for battle, but there was something in their eyes that spoke of something else. Fear. "Lyra," Cal called, his voice soft but insistent as he stepped forward from the shadows. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "We've lost so many already. This attack, it could destroy us." "I'm not going to let that happen," she said, her voice firm, though it shook with the weight of her own uncertainty. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the faces of the rebels, their hopes and fears written plainly in their expressions. "We fight to survive. I fight to protect you all." Cal's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "You fight with power you don't fully understand, and I'm scared it will consume you." Lyra paused, taking in his words. The concern in his eyes tore at her, but the vision of the enemy warships overhead, so close, so unforgiving, drowned out everything else. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. I will control it, Kale, she said quietly. I have to. But he shook his head. The more you use it, the harder it will be to hold on. What if you lose yourself in the process? The question hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. What if? But she couldn't afford the luxury of doubt. She had seen what the invaders could do. She had witnessed their devastation, the merciless destruction they left in their wake. I won't let this world fall, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Not while I have a breath in my body. Kale stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder, his grip firm. His voice was barely a whisper now. Lyra, you're not just Wonder Woman's daughter. You're you. You're not alone in this fight. We're with you. Her heart pounded as his words hit her like a wave. We're with you. It was more than just a promise. It was a bond. A promise to stand together, to face the storm, no matter what came. Lyra looked up, her eyes meeting Cal's one last time before the sound of the war machines grew louder, the ground vibrating beneath her feet. It was now or never. She turned toward the battlefield, her breath steadying. The invaders' ships descended like vultures, their cold metal hulls gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. They were descending into the valley, ready to crush everything in their path. Lyra stepped forward, her fists clenched at her sides. She could feel the power building inside her once more, threatening to consume her, to take control. But she didn't let it. Not yet. Get ready, she shouted to the rebels, her voice sharp and commanding. This is our world, and we fight for it. The rebels rallied around her, their faces set with grim determination. They knew the stakes. They knew the price of failure. And together, they would face the storm. But as the first ships landed, as the ground cracked and rumbled under the weight of the enemy's onslaught, Lyra felt it, the pull of the power that had been growing within her. It called to her like a siren song, promising victory, but at what cost? She closed her eyes, pushing aside the fear, the doubt, the desire for power. She couldn't let it take over. Not today. With a final breath, Lyra raised her arms to the sky, and for the first time, she embraced the force within her. She called upon the earth, upon the power of her bloodline, upon the strength of her mother's legacy. The ground trembled again. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was the beginning of a new power, a power she was finally ready to wield. And as the first blast of energy tore through the sky, Lyra knew she had made her choice. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was the battle for her soul. The battle had erupted in a violent storm of chaos. The sound of clashing steel and the roar of weaponry filled the air as Lyra stood at the heart of the battlefield, the rebels rallying around her. The ground shook with every explosion, dust and smoke swirling through the air, obscuring everything in a thick, choking haze. But Lyra could feel it, the power within her, rising with every breath. The earth beneath her feet trembled in response, as if it too was waiting for the moment when she would finally command it. Her hands clenched into fists, the edges of her mother's tiara gleaming in the dim light. She had tried to hold back. She had tried to fight with only her will and the strength of her people. But the invaders were relentless, their technology far more advanced than anything the rebels could hope to match. The moment the first ship had landed, she knew there was no other way. Now, the time had come. Kale had said it. You have the power to save this world, or destroy it. The words echoed in her mind as she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she locked onto the massive war machine that loomed before her. It was a towering mechanical behemoth, its weapons glowing ominously with energy. It fired, and the blast sent soldiers scattering, throwing them to the ground with an intensity that shook the heavens. But Lyra didn't move. She stood still, her gaze unwavering, her mind focused on the task ahead. The warship's weapons hummed, charging for another strike, and then the world went quiet. For a split second, everything stood still. Lyra reached deep inside herself, feeling the darkness and the light within her, the duality of her existence. her mother's legacy, and the raw power she had inherited. It was a constant struggle, a fight within herself to remain whole, to remain human, even as the godlike force threatened to swallow her. But she had a choice. She always had a choice. With a breath, she released the power within her. The air crackled, the ground beneath her feet shaking violently as an explosion of energy erupted from her body. Her hand stretched toward the heavens, and the earth itself seemed to respond. Massive cracks tore through the ground, pulling the war machines into the depths, while jagged spikes of rock shot up, impaling them with brutal force. The invaders' machines screamed in protest as Lyra's power surged through them, each blast of energy ripping apart their cold, mechanical bodies. She could feel the dark side of her power, the part that sought to destroy, raging at the edge of her control. But she focused, holding on to the part of herself that still held on to hope, that still clung to the belief that this world was worth saving. The sky itself seemed to crack open, lightning flashing in the distance as Lyra's power cascaded through the battlefield like a tidal wave, unstoppable and overwhelming. The ships above trembled, their engines sputtering as the magnetic forces she summoned reached them. And then, silence. The war machines were gone. The invaders' ships lay wrecked on the ground, smoldering ruins where they had once stood. The battlefield, once a place of violence, was now eerily still. Lyra stood at the center, breathing heavily, her clothes torn, her body exhausted from the exertion of controlling such an immense force. She collapsed to her knees, the weight of what she had just done settling over her like a heavy cloak. The power still buzzed in her veins, a constant reminder of what she had almost become. Cale was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. His eyes were filled with awe. And something else. Something deeper. Something that she couldn't quite place. "You did it," he said softly, his voice a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You saved us." Lyra's heart still raced, but now there was a quiet emptiness inside her, a deep ache that came from knowing the cost. She had saved them, yes, but at what price? "I don't know if I can do it again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to control it, Hale. What if it takes me over?" Cale didn't answer at first. Instead, he knelt beside her, his gaze softening as he took her hand. "You don't have to do it alone," he said quietly. "You're not just Wonder Woman's daughter, you're Lyra. And we will fight with you, together." Lyra looked up at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself believe it. The storm inside her had calmed for now. And for the first time, she could see a future, one where she wasn't just a weapon or a legacy. She was a hero, a person, a daughter. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The sun began to break through the smoke and clouds, casting light over the ruined battlefield, and Lyra knew that the fight wasn't over. Because she wasn't just the last of the Amazons. She was something more.